So now I would like to introduce you to our OCCW winner, Outstanding Contribution to Computing by Women, and the awardee is Dr. Hemangi Kapoor. So Dr. Hemangi Kapoor is a professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati. She received her undergrad engineering degree from College of Engineering, Pune, and her MTech from IIT Bombay, and she has completed a PhD degree in CSE from London South Bank University, UK. Her research spans in the broad area of computer architecture and specifically in multi-core caches, emerging non-volatile memory technologies, network on chip, and design of accelerators for neural networks. She is a senior member of IEEE and ACM. She has published her work in reputed journals and conferences and has few best paper awards. She is associate editor of Journal of System Architecture and IEEE Design and Test. Professor Kapoor has been very active in ACM India and has participated at various capacities and roles as a member from 2014 to 22, as vice president for the council from 2020 to 22. She serves as a member of ACM International Council for Diversity and Equity and Inclusion since 2021. So, Professor Hemangi has been recognized for her contributions to emerging non-volatile memory technologies, for her active leadership and involvement in mentoring of women in the field too. So her title for the talk today is Longevity in Emerging NVMs and Career. And in her talk, she will talk about not only about the technologies or techniques to improve NVM longevity, but she will also discuss roles in academic career and how to handle the challenges. And it will be a pleasure to listen to her. So I, along with all of you, welcome her to take the stage and start her talk. Thank you.
Because I have to live up to the expectations, and I was little apprehensive what should I talk. Because of 20 years of a career in academia, there is so much I can tell, but I have to squeeze everything in 40 minutes. It need not be full research, it need not be only motivational. So many thoughts in mind. I have tried to combine most of those things and squeezed in a 40-minute presentation. I hope the audience will time me, and apologies if I go beyond your expectations or below your expectations. All right. So the title of my talk is Longevity. Now, it's a general term, but my research, as Rupi mentioned about the award, that it's about non-volatile memories. So it's about NVMs, which is non-volatile memories, and to the young audience, longevity in a career is also important. So I've combined the two things in my title. Okay. Right. So this is the overall outline of my presentation. So for the first portion, I'm going to cover about research on non-volatile memories, and then I'll continue with the academic journey of mine. Maybe boring, but we'll just finish it quickly if it's not interesting to you. And then towards the end, tips for survival and some take-home messages to the young audience. Okay, so starting with this emerging NVMs. So we have all done as students. How many are students here? Okay, so 80% population is a student community. All right. So you've done a basic computer architecture course and organization course in your bachelor's level, and this topic falls under that. So in the organization course, you have a processor, you have cache, and the main memory. These are the three main components, and the cache and the memory is what I work in, to give you a broad picture of that. And NVM stands for non-volatile memory. Your first encounter with a NVM came in the form of a pen drive or flash drives which you use, or memory sticks which you have been using. So these are non-volatile because when you store data into it, it stays there forever. Okay. So I work in those memories, and what's there to work in that? So let us see. And what leads us to these NVMs. So that's the background. So I'm going to start with a quick background, what led the research to non-volatile memories, and then what are the avenues in that. So as the slide said, we are going to look at multi-core revolution quickly in 2 slides, and then understand the non-volatile memories. Okay, so Moore's law. How many of you know what Moore's law is? You've heard that. Okay, right. So Moore's law says that some x parameter is going to double every 18 to 24 months. Now this x could be computer performance, the clock speed, or the number of transistors which are there on the chip. Okay, now if we always want increase, but we don't want to pay extra cost, right? You buy one get one free is always good. So we want that. So can I have 2 pizzas for the cost of 1? So I was getting this all these years. And why was I getting? I am getting doubling the performance at constant cost, so same price. So I'm doubling the transistors, and that was at the same cost. So what is the cost? The cost in a processor is the power I consume. Okay, so for pizza you pay money, and for processors we pay power. So in the same power budget, if I can do more work, it is like a buy one get one free offer for me. So this don't get into details if you don't understand, but the orange line is the leakage current. So this is your basal metabolic rate type analogy. You don't do anything, but you are going to consume some energy. That's the orange one. When you do work, that's the green one. And the intersection of that is the total power you are going to consume. Okay, so we want to optimize on that. You'll say that, well, how does my leakage, which is the static power, matter? Okay, as long as you do more work, you're going to consume more power. If you do less work, you're going to consume less power. But if you don't do anything, are you going to consume more power as you age or whatever? So with transistors, that is true, because as you reduce the transistor size, the leakage current, which is the work, which is the power you consume when you don't do anything, increases. Right? So that's why it is called leakage. Okay, I should have put this slide earlier, because this says why do we get that buy one get one free offer. So this is because of the concept of Dennard scaling. The second bullet says that the power consumed by a device is alpha CV square F. What is C? C stands for Basic Electronics first year course. Capacitance, V for voltage, F for frequency. Okay. So alpha is a constant factor, is normally half. Right. So when I shrink the transistor, Moore's law is giving me more transistors, means the transistor size becomes small. So when this size becomes small, your area reduces of the transistor. When area reduces, the capacitance required reduces. So C is proportional to area. And the voltage also reduces, because you need less power to power a tiny device. So V has reduced, C has reduced. Okay, and you have constant power. So what is the impact? Algebra. C reduces, V reduces. If P is constant, then F increases. So that's why a processor speeds increase from 800 megahertz to 4 gigahertz with the same budget. Okay, so you had the same power and you could do that. But what happened beyond 2004, 2006, as I reduced the transistor size, the C and V continued to reduce, but the leakage current, the orange line, went up. And because my leakage current increased, my left hand side started increasing and I was not able to increase the F. So the frequency has capped to 4 gigahertz since 2006. Okay, so if I had increased the F, the left hand side would increase. Okay, so beyond 2006, power was not directly constant, and increasing F would increase the heat dissipated by the CPUs because the power increased. And I could not increase the frequency, so what should I do with the transistors which Moore is giving me? So we said, okay, let me put multiple processors with slow running applications. So the gigahertz is not more, but I have multiple cores which will run at that speed, and that's the multi-core revolution. So instead of we saying that the frequency doubles every 24 months, we are going to say the number of cores will double every 24 months. So now I get double cores with the Moore's law. How do I use them? I can't use the same core to do a better application, but I have multiple copies. So I need to go parallel, write software which is parallel, and that's how utilize the multiple cores. So this is the multi-core revolution, and that's the background why we went from a single core processor to a multi-core processor system. So this is the previous generation Intel processor chip, which has 4 cores, and then it goes up to 8 cores and so on. Right. So that was the motivation, right? So we've come from single core to multi-core. Now when I have multiple cores, I need to run multiple applications, more data. And where does the data come from? Through the memory hierarchy. So your data is in the disk, it has to come all the way to the cache to run. So you need more data to run these applications. So overall this says that your overall power consumption is dynamic and static. Dynamic power is active work. Who's doing active work? The processor. So processor is consuming dynamic power, whereas who's consuming the lazy leakage power? The storage devices, that is the cache and the main memory. And the leakage increases as the transistor size decreases. So if I am concentrating on the leakage current or the leakage power consumption, I have to take care of the memory device. And how do I reduce the power consumed by a memory device? Because the SRAMs and the DRAMs consume a lot of power, so can I replace the device with something else? Okay, so non-volatile memories were the savers here because they consume very less leakage power. Therefore, the avenues have opened up that I replace the dynamic memories with non-volatile memories. Okay. So why non-volatile memories? Because we have more cores, we need more data. SRAM and DRAM, SRAM is used in cache, DRAM is used in main memories. All of them consume more leakage current, and they have low density. That is, the amount of data which I can write in a given square millimeter area is lesser. If I go non-volatile, I can pack 3 times the data in that same amount of space, and therefore we will use non-volatile memories in place of or as assistance to these volatile counterparts. Okay, so all good things, but nothing comes for free. So what is the challenge? So the challenge here is that these, well, I've listed the names of the non-volatile memories there. The challenge with non-volatile memories is that they are very slow in writing. It takes time to write, and the dynamic power is more. The dynamic power with SRAM and DRAM was very less, but the dynamic power of non-volatile memories is pretty high. So I want to I want to control the dynamic energy, and I want to see that how can I manage the writes which are very slow. The third disadvantage is they have weak endurance. Okay, so endurance means they don't last longer. So for us as human beings, what gives us longer, stronger lifetime? What would give us a healthy lifetime? If we do exercise. If we use our muscles, we become stronger. The opposite is true with memories. If you use these non-volatile memories, they'll become weaker. Okay, it's the exactly opposite thing. So the more you use, the earlier they will wear out, and the less I use them, the longer they will last. So the weak endurance is another problem I need to handle. So my whole focus has been on improving the endurance, which is the title of the talk, improving the longevity of non-volatile memories. Okay, so that's the summary. Advantage of NVMs is high density, 3 times more data on the same real estate, and low leakage. Limitations is weak endurance, slow writes, and high write energy. How do I improve the lifetime? So, well, this is a small list. I'm not going to cover all of them. I'll cover 2-3 of these. So, to give you an analogy, this is the hall. Suppose this is a non-volatile memory, and all of us are fond of sitting in the last bench. Okay, so if you sit on the last bench every day for several years, that chair, what's going to happen to the foam of that chair? It will become thinner and thinner, and the hands will start falling down and so on. So the chairs will tend to break after a while. Why? Because you are using it more and more, and the front 3 rows are perfectly new, brand new. Okay, and the administration says that even if 1 row of chairs is gone, this hall is not usable anymore, which is a loss because not all the chairs have worn out, only few chairs have worn out. So that happens in memories. If certain rows or certain cells are damaged, I cannot use that memory device. Your pen drives have worn out after 3 to 4 years. So you have to replace them with new ones. Okay. So keeping that in mind, how do I solve this problem for this room? I should make sure that the students or the occupants sit in chairs equally and uniformly. Every chair gets used uniformly, or they are not used at all. So the first one is right distribution, that is sitting in every chair uniformly, using the chairs like that, and right reduction, that is reduce the usage. So these are the two avenues to improve the lifetime of non-volatile memories. So right uniformity is one aspect. So looking at the time, I might not cover 4 of these. I'll maybe cover 1 and then go to the overall picture. Okay, yeah. So this data shows the distribution of right distribution in the cache. So cache, all of you understand, right? Direct map cache, associative cache, fully associative cache, and cache is divided into sets. Sets has ways. Okay. So here the colors on the right hand side graph are showing different sets. So red is set number 2047 in the cache, and the green is set number 4095. So you can see the lengths, bar lengths are different, which says that these are used differently. That is, first row is used heavily, the 5th row is used less, and so on. So that's the distribution. And within the set also, the ways within the set, the first row is used heavily, but the middle 2 chairs are never used. So overall the count is high, but some chairs are less used. So I need to do this equal distribution, and so for that we can say that we can do a right restriction on certain sets, or certain ways. That is, I'll say the first lecture, the first 3 chairs will be used, the next lecture, the next 3 chairs should be used, and so on. So I'll do a round robin distribution saying that you have to use this in this way. Okay. So right restriction says here that the first window, which is a collection of sets, collection of ways, I'm not going to write to them. Not going to write to them means save their life. So writes will not happen in W1, but they'll happen in W2, 3 and 4. So these are windows, that is logical partitions of the cache. So one partition is not written to, others will be written. And then I do a round robin scheduling for this, and this makes sure that we equally utilize them. Okay. However, this is very coarse level. I have made a big partition. So can I go for fine partitions? Yes, you can do a fine partition of it by dynamically selecting those columns which are currently in problem. So here it was fixed. That is, I go round robin 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Whereas in the more finer granularity, I can take the rows differently. Okay. And then I can do it at module wise, that is, first look at certain number of sets at the top and do the same algo, but divide the hall into horizontal partitions and then do it within that. So overall, this is using right restriction. I'm making sure that the data is uniformly written in all these locations. Okay. Then the second topic is where leveling. Where leveling says that you write at different locations. So here the top one is an uncompressed data block, but if we use compression, which many of the memory techniques use, if I compress a data block, I'm going to write either on this side of the location or from right hand side, either from left or from right. So if I write from the left hand side, I'm going to utilize those cells more than the other side cells. So these cells will wear out quickly. Okay, so as you see here, the green color says that the dark green color says I have worn out the cells on the left hand side. So how do I solve this problem? How do I solve this problem? By making sure that the compressed block is a half of that. Okay, so I'll make sure that then every time I write, I start from a different location. Okay, so I'll have a stride and I'll keep shifting it. That's called stride based wear leveling. So initially, I'll write here. After the second write, I will start from that position and not from the leftmost position, and so on. Okay, so this is called horizontal intra block wear leveling method. And with this, what you end up is the dark green color is not dark. Overall, the whole set becomes light green in color. So this aspect is called where leveling. Okay, this I won't go in details, I'll just give you a quick idea. Encryption. Now, where is encryption and security coming into picture? So, non-volatile memories are going to retain the data forever, and if I use them as main memories, if you shut down your PC and go somewhere, malicious user can take access of your memory, main memory, which is on the PCB. So, if they take that non-volatile memory, they can read out your data. This doesn't happen with DRAM, because in DRAM, when you turn off the power, your data is gone. Okay. So, non-volatile data stays in the main memory and it is accessible to malicious users. How do I solve this problem? By encrypting data. So, you have to use the security techniques. So, every time I write data to the non-volatile main memory, I have to encrypt it using AES or other encryption methods. The problem with encryption is it is going to completely obfuscate your data. You are not going to understand what happens. So, that is the diffusion property. Here in the green on the picture you can see, if I just change one bit on the left hand side, it ends up changing 256 bits out of 512. So, many bits are changing. If I do this, every bit change in the memory is effectively a write. So, I am wearing out the memory. My objective is don't write, reduce writes. Okay, but my encryption is ending up changing the bit flips or increasing the bit flips in the main memory. Got the problem? Now, how do I solve this? I have to encrypt for security, but encryption is leading to more bit flips. Okay. So, for this, because many methods exist, what I am going to show here is using some popular words. So, some words or what do I mean by word? The content which is written in the main memory. Okay, every application writes some data, and we did an analysis of the data which is written by applications and saw that you get around 14%. So, 14% of the words are very popular, that is frequently used. Right, in English language also, if you do some statistics, you will say that the word I, the, from, it will be used many times. Okay, so every time the word the, is used, why should I encrypt it? I know that this location has the word the, I need not encrypt it, but I keep it in a separate table. So, I am going to avoid encryption of the popular words, and that is going to save me lots of writes, because popular words occur almost 80% of the time. So, I will directly go to an example. I will just skip this. So, for this we maintained a popular word table which is on the left hand side. The words C and B are very popular, A and G are less popular. So, we call them cold words and hot words, and the plain text data which I am going to write to the memory is A, C, T and D, that yellow one. Okay. So, if I end up encrypting this, I am going to have lots of bit flips in the main memory, but if I use my lookup table on the left hand side, I will see that word A is there in that, and even C is there in my table. So, I am going to use pointers to that and write the indexes in place of A. So, where I have to write A, I will write the index ID 2, instead of C, I will write the index number 0, and for T and D, which are not so popular, I am going to write their encrypted versions. Anyway, they are not popular, so you cannot maintain a full table for them. So, what does this give me? I have saved encryption of 2 words, which is a big achievement. So, this, how do I identify these words? So, you have to go through a training phase for every application and build this popular word table. Okay, so that's the internal details of how do you build this in the cache controller and memory controller. Okay, I'll just go to the results. Sorry for the lots of animation. Okay, so with our proposal, this is the proposal called PropCrypt, we could reduce the bit flips by 38%. There are existing methods which do this with a different ideation, so they reduce 30% and so on, and our overall lifetime improvement compared to baseline was 30%. Okay, I will skip this portion and directly go to next part of my talk. Okay, so this was the summary of NVM lifetime. So, we can uniformly distribute the data. We can compress the data and store at different locations, that is where leveling. We can skip encryption if your memory has security aspects. And again, the list is long. Those who are interested, we can take this offline. Okay. So I hope it gave you an idea of what emerging NVMs are and what are the challenges. We covered 2-3 of those. Now moving on to the part 2 of the talk, longevity in a career. So first, my journey, whether it's interesting or not, I have just listed it, and then we will go to what's there for the student community. Okay, so research, teaching, administration. These are the 3 heads which I've been working on. So research, as you got a glimpse, I work in cache memory, main memories, and both of these in emerging non-volatile memories, and also work in memory request scheduling. So when requests go to a main memory, and if the main memory is non-volatile, it is slow to write, it is slow in every response. So how do I improve the service time of such memories? By doing a memory request scheduler. So memory controller has a scheduler which will send your read-write request to the main memory, and you have to manage them such that if this request is for a DRAM, it has to go at this speed. If it is for a non-volatile, it should go this way. So the controller should be aware of whom am I asking. If I am sending a question to a student who is very fast and versus a student who is slow in solving a maths problem, I should send the slow student the question first and the fast student later, so that I get the response at the same time or back to back. Okay, so that's the scheduling aspect of these. So we also work in that and several other things. So research is related to having masters and MTech students as well as sponsored projects. So research outcome, how do you evaluate outcome? By publications, and of course in good reputed venues. Don't go behind numbers, go behind quality. Always see that you have a good quality 1 paper instead of 5 mediocre papers. Then have PhD doctorate students, that is for a faculty member. And for the students, a motivation to do research, it starts with a doctorate student. Then H-index and citations are the matrix of measuring your research outcome, and whether you are recognized by the community is if you are on editorial boards of journals. Now what does this mean? When you as students submit papers to journals, somebody has to review them. But you need an administrative panel at the journal who will collect these papers, assign it to correct reviewers, and then collect the feedback and see whether the quality is good, bad. So somebody has to evaluate your publication or your submission, and that is the editorial board of a journal. And who will go into this board? If you are expert of that field. So through years of research, you have to establish yourself such that the journal identifies you as a qualified researcher and appoints you as an editor or associate editor on these journals. So that is also a metric for a good research outcome. A quick, so that's my lab in IIT Guwahati is called SUSMA, for Sustainable Multi-Core Architectures. So anyway, then what are the challenges in doing research? So I do research in systems, although it is main memory, but the broad area is systems, and it is very difficult to convince scholars to do research in systems. Some of them perceive it to be hard. And if you get scholars, it is very difficult to train them, because systems, as the word says, it spans many things. You need to know algorithms, data structures, hardware, operating system, at times even transistors. I told you Dennard scaling algorithm, right? That equation. You need to understand that to appreciate what you are doing. Okay. So we go from systems, OS, memory to little bit of electronics. So that whole stack, if you know, and you have to train the students because they don't come with that prior knowledge. So train them, recruit them first thing, keep them motivated over the 5 to 6 years that yes, eventually you will learn something, you will get papers and so on. Then as a faculty, I need to get sponsored projects from industry or government. When you have a project, you need to recruit project staff who will do the work, which is again a tough challenge. And last but not the least, keep up to date with the current industry trends. Even if you have a dream project, it may not be useful to the society. So you have to keep yourself updated. So that's the research journey. Then regarding teaching, these are the subjects I normally teach. The first year course comes to all faculty once you've spent 3-4 years in the institute. So this course has around 1100 to 1200 students in an IIT, and you are given responsibility of half of them. So managing those from teaching to lab assignments to grading is a big task. So that's more people management than content management. Then I teach all the courses related to hardware, that is the digital design, basic processor design, advanced processor design, parallel architecture, and I also have an NPTEL MOOC course on parallel architecture running right now. Hardware labs. So hardware labs are interesting to some students, but not to every student. So how to make it interesting to everybody. And when you have to run a hardware lab with 25 units and 100 students, so you have 4 students per hardware kit. Not everybody works, right? One student is just going to be a non-looker. And I cannot reach as one single instructor to all these 25 tables teaching them what to do. So for that, I need a team of teaching assistants who are the MTechs and the PhD students. And I need to train them a day or two in advance so that when we go live, that is in the lab, these, how many TAs would I need if I have 25? Say, if I have 5, each handles 5 tables, right? Or if I have 10, lucky to have 10, then good. So I have to train the trainers first, and before training the trainers, I have to train myself, because each year I can't have the same assignments. You have to keep updating the assignments, keep them interested and so on. So that these are the challenges which we face when we teach. To keep the class interactive, because I don't want the students yawning when I'm teaching. They might as well go to their hostel rooms and sleep. So I want the class interactive. I want to try out different methods of teaching. I don't want to do the same set of slides in the same way I taught each year. So I keep experimenting on course delivery assignments. The main challenge came in COVID when we went offline to online evaluation. How to keep them still engaged when there is no teacher in front of us. So that was again a learning curve for even teachers. How to handle ever-growing large classes. Government of India says, yes, 6,500 more seats in IITs, right? This budget said. Now that's going to calculate how many students. And computer science is the most demanding discipline. So I started my career with 30 students in my class. I knew everybody by face and name. Now my class strength is 120 in computer science. But if I teach a joint course, I have 250 students in my class. No way I can remember their names. So how do I handle them? Last 4 rows are going to do YouTube or do something. And so how to keep them engaged somehow that eventually they will take home some learning through this course. So keep them giving assignments, homework problems, share notes, which I never used to do earlier. I write on the board and the board is wiped and it's gone. But nowadays, the young generation demands material. Give us material so that we can read it offline. Okay, so with the generations, we have to adapt ourselves as teachers. So these are the challenges. So it's not ek baar seekh liya ho gaya. It's a continuous process for us teachers also. And administration. So all this runs because there is an administrative system above us. Your hostels run because there's a warden. Food comes on time at 1 p.m. for your lunch. How does it come? Because somebody has managed to buy that. Budget is there is cooking equipment, you go for sports, your sports complex is there, you have your cricket bat, you have your badminton net, everything is set. You don't do that as students, somebody does that. So that's the institute administration, and we faculty are poor guys who have to even do that apart from teaching. Okay, so I have done most of those roles. So I was a hostel warden. Then student welfare associate dean there, then alumni, then again apart from institute organizations, I have to do conference organizations like here. Professor sitting here is organizing this event. Well, you don't get anything out of it, but that is the service as a professional we do to the community, because when we were students, somebody did it for us, and now when I am faculty, I have to do it for the new generation. So that is the administrative role. We have to wear multiple hats. The job is tough and nobody teaches this. You don't learn how to administer in any course. So it is a self-trained, on-the-job training work. So you join and they just put you learn how to manage a hostel. So you have to go around, find problems, what are the challenges faced by people, and then find workarounds. In all these, you have to keep people happy. It's a people management work. You cannot be a boss just dictating. Nobody's going to listen. At least the current generation won't listen. Previously, people were like, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, we'll do it. Current generation will argue back. So you have to keep them in confidence, make them realize what to do. So it's a people management business, resource management. In a little funding, how do I manage it? Okay, if the table tennis table is broken, how do I convince the students that it can run for another 2 years? Okay, so depending on the budget, we have to do all this management, and nobody taught us, we learn it on the job. during all this, don't forget to have kindness and empathy. End of the day, social good and progress is our objective. Okay, so that's the career aspect. And what's there for me meaning the audience. Okay, so some take-home pointers for you is that you have to do self-study. Not everything is going to be taught in the class. Improve your communication skills, teamwork, network, and so on. So communication is a very important skill. You all are here, so I am sure you understand the importance. You have to give seminars, and it starts with your first year MTech or PhD level work. When you start something, you read a research paper and present it to your team, because when you start presenting, you'll realize you hardly understood the paper. If you sit and read, yeah, everything is fine. But when you stand here, oh, that bullet point, somebody will ask, what does that mean? No, I don't know. Okay, so presentation also improves your understanding of the topic, and thinking and putting your ideas together is going to exercise your brain. Don't depend on ChatGPT, exercise your own brain. Then teamwork helps. Learn to work with others, because I do not know other areas, but in systems especially, you cannot survive if your seniors are not helping you. And why will they help you? They have no advantage in helping you. As I said, you do for the society, society does for you. So the mangoes I eat, those trees I never planted. So similarly, when you were students, your seniors helped you. Now you are senior, you have to help your juniors, and it's a teamwork. Don't always expect that if I help in coding to this, I'm going to be a co-author on the paper. No way. Okay, so it's a team effort. Sometimes you will get advantage, sometimes you won't get advantage, but in the whole process, you are going to learn. And networking is another important skill. Socialize with professionals. It helps you to grow. Attend conferences, workshops. You are doing it already, because you need to show also what you are doing. If you work in your lab, it's not going to be sufficient. You have to be visible in the world of social media. Okay, last slide. To summarize, we should have patience and perseverance in anything which we do. Especially during a research or a PhD, after 3 years of research, you don't have enough papers, but the 4th and the 5th year might have good papers. So continue your effort and have patience. So continue your efforts, don't give up. If certain methods don't work, don't be adamant that this is how I'm going to do it. No, try to change, but don't change immediately. Have patience to use that. Eventually you can take advice and then change the methods of work. Then hard work, keep goals in front of you. And if you feel tired, yes, that's my goal, I have to keep working, because hard work always pays off in the long run. You can always enjoy later, but you must work hard right now. And failures, of course, come. They will change their form in each career. So it's not that if somebody is established as a faculty, they don't have failures. We have failures of different kinds. As students, you have failures of different kinds. So you need to overcome and learn how to overcome failures, because they will change their face every time. The form will change, but your determination and your capacity to overcome them, if you build it from student life, it will help you throughout. Okay. So with all this, the longevity of you in life and career is going to improve. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hemangi ma'am. It has been a wonderful talk. Today, when I listen to you, I understand that your students must be enjoying your lectures, because everything that you explained today, there were analogies, and I can tell you that in the 20-30 minutes, I was able to understand every work that you are doing.
Thank you.
So I think all must be agreeing with me. And the next part of your talk, when you talked about career and the roles that we do, I again was very happy that I was relating that we do this, and when I feel why I'm doing this, today I'm motivated, we all are doing it. So it's okay, it's a part of our job, right? And the inspiring words were really very apt and required for the generation here. So we are open for questions. So,
Ma'am,
yeah.
Ma'am, here.
She has a question.
Are NVMs used for content delivery networks? And if
Content delivery.
Content delivery networks where servers have been geographically distributed in order to avoid, for disaster recovery instead of a single server in geographically one place. Are NVMs used for that? And if yes, what is the cost and power trade-off for providing a low latency output?
Oh, good question. I do not know about this, don't have a direct answer, but yes, they are definitely used as, even at disk levels, you have these solid state devices, SSD drives which you use, and these servers require them because of the less heat dissipation by the NVM devices. They do use them, and there is a PCIe Express protocol which helps to use SSD drives compared to a hard disk. So you have to use a different protocol. They are there in these data servers, and latency, SSDs are much faster than hard disk. What I was talking about latency challenges is up to the main memory, because DRAM is extremely fast compared to its NVM counterparts. But when I go beyond the chip to the disk level, then the non-volatile disks are much faster than the magnetic counterparts, so hard disk counterparts. Yes, they are definitely used, but your other question I can't answer, that is how do they manage latency, because that is the data server disk management level protocols which I do not work in.
I have a question here, madam. So, with the advent of LLMs, how do you see LLMs are reshaping? Especially, we would want to only load certain of the parameters into the model, and whenever we would want to have a data checkpoint, and then we would want to transfer it from the training phase to the inference phase, and so on. Like, what is the work that you are doing?
Okay, yeah. So very apt and relevant question for the current generation. Yes, so I do not directly, right now don't work in LLMs, but we have done some work in CNNs, where not in training, because training, we didn't do much work, but inference we've done work with volatile memories. Then we realized that, as you said, NVMs are slow to write and they will wear out, and if I use them in inference, where I'm going to do millions of reads and writes to do the inference, it is going to slow down and also wear out the memory. So for that, you could use NVMs to store the models and the input because of the density. Exploit the density aspect of NVM and use the faster aspect of the DRAMs. So for intermediate results, you can use DRAM or dynamic memory, and for final outcome, you can use NVMs which can store huge amounts of data. So that is one aspect. And what else? NVMs. And people are also in the design aspect, we work on designing accelerators which is having good processing elements or multiplier accumulator units design. The research avenue there is again algorithmic. How do I distribute the workloads in my processing array such that I get quicker outcomes? So from the ML AI perspective, this is one thing to do. And just to continue, add one point is for edge inference, if you are doing on edge devices, then non-volatile memories are, there's no replacement for them, because edge devices won't have power, continuous power supply. So your intermediate results also will need to be permanently stored. So NVMs will come into play. Fourth aspect is not directly for read-write, but there is a memory called ReRAM, resistive random access memory, which is resistance based. So these are used for in-memory compute. So I do not need a CMOS multiplier, but we have to program the resistances in this memory such that when I give the inputs and the weights on both ends, the resistance and the current is an RC circuit. It gives you the multiplier accumulate answer at the bottom. So it is called in-memory compute. I don't work in that, but that is the heavy use of non-volatile memories in inference. Thank you.
Yeah. So I had a question. Do we use error correcting codes in memory at all in like today's computers?
Yes, we do. Yes.
So,
even DRAMs definitely have, even non-volatile memories have. So the storage device at the end, you will have 8-bit or 16-bit error correcting codes stored. Yes, they are used.
This is what level? Like word level error correction? Or
No, it is bit level. So it is bit level. So single bit changes, that is single error correcting, and double error detection. These are the two codes which we use. So if there is an error in a single bit, these are Hamming distance codes. I don't remember them much. But if a single bit gets flipped, the error correcting code will tell you which bit has flipped, so you can reflip it and read the data. And if two bits have flipped, it will tell you this is double error detection. It says that there is error in 2 bits, but it is not able to identify those 2 bits. Hence, it simply declares that the data has error. So that's the role of the ECC in
and
memory.
this has been there
Yes.
forever, or
Yeah.
is it some recent thing?
It has been there at least, I don't know since when, but since I have been studying as a student, ECC has been there.
So whenever something is written into the disk, it is automatically error coded
Yeah.
and then written into the
Yes,
disk?
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful talk. So I had a broad question about where this field is going, right? So a few years ago, non-volatile memory technology was super hot and we were all waiting for a commercial product. That's when I think Intel and Micron
Yes.
released the 3D Crosspoint, right?
Hmm.
And then a couple of years later, they discontinued it. So is there a commercially available product now? And like, what was the reason? I think the performance price point kind of did not take off, right? So where do you see this field going?
Yeah, I also heard recently that Intel started their Optane device and then they discontinued, and they told their researchers that, yeah, we are not going to do any further NVM research. That may be because, I don't know from the business perspective, but from, if you look at sustainability and green computing, NVMs is the way because it's going to save so much energy. And as I mentioned, in-memory compute is another big avenue for the upcoming ML workloads. So if we can do them in NVMs, it is good. It may not come in commercial compute, but we can have these dedicated accelerators which are using NVMs and edge devices. So I don't see NVMs going away. And of course, as researcher, I have to be optimistic. I've invested 15 years and I can't just leave them.
Yes, so I had a question here, ma'am. So in non-volatile memory, are there any attacks like in DRAM you have the row hammer, and does the breakdown of these memory cells, does it make these cells more susceptible to those attacks? And another question was in PopCrypt, right? Is there any introduction of timing channels because of that certain words are encrypted and certain words are not encrypted, and because you're finding out common words and not actually writing back to those cells, does that introduce any timing channels? Like for example, in Enigma, that cipher was broken because there were certain words which were common.
Okay. So security aspect. So your first question was row hammer type attack. Yes, it happens in non-volatile memories. So people again are doing research in that to observe the traces sent by a malicious application to purposely wear out the memory. Okay. So for that, proposed solutions are that they keep changing the address of writing. Suppose I'm writing to address 500 and the malicious user knows that 500 is a hot location. But I will keep changing this address so frequently that even if repeated writes to that address will be distributed across the memory. So this is one solution which is existing, and maybe new avenues are being getting done. But I don't directly work, so I don't have the literature for it. But yes, it is possible. Research happens there. And in my proposed PopCrypt, good observation that the popular words are not encrypted. So our claim there is that the popular word table is in the DRAM, or it's in the secure processor boundary. So it is beyond the attacker's control. And you would say that if power goes off, then I lose that table. So what happens? So we say that we are going to encrypt this table and write in the main memory. So it has recovery. Okay, so the popular word table is few kilobytes. We'll encrypt the full table. It's not going to cost much. It is one-time encryption. So at like checkpoints, we can back it up into the non-volatile memory, but every time it remains in the secure processor boundary.
Hello, ma'am. So I wanted to ask something about the second part of your talk. You mentioned how professors have to do a lot of admin work, And having done my undergrad at an IIT, and I was also fortunate to be one of these members of the Gymkhana.
Okay.
So I just know like how much effort goes into making it all a very fair and democratic process, and you know you can't really dictate things there. And much of that burden, as you said, is shared by a professor. So do you think that like that at times or at most times comes in your way of like devoting yourself to research or doing research which you truly enjoy? And if yes, then how do you like manage that? Because I think that's probably what you enjoy the most.
Yeah, I enjoy research the most, but as again, as professionals, we have multiple hats to wear. If your mother likes to work, she can't refuse to cook. If your father just likes to work, he cannot refuse to take you for a movie, right? So we have to do all these roles and manage them. So I would say IIT is generous enough to offer these responsibilities. At the same time, they take care that we don't have to do it for a lifelong. It is a 3 to 4 year term. However, as you grow senior in your career, they assume that you are now very trained researcher, you will manage students as it is. So this you can handle, but this job is not given to young faculty. So if you are in 10 years into the system, you will get these roles, and every 3 years you have the opportunity to come out of that role. But it is a learning experience and good to do. So I did that for, I don't know, warden, 3 roles, 3 years each. And presently I am not holding any administrative post, back to research. But my students are not very happy when I take an admin role, because they will think that ma'am will have less time for them. It is a trade-off, but good learning experience for all of us. And we have to contribute. Who else will do if we don't do?